The story begins with a wounded Kazuki lying on the ground, declaring that he won't lose. The long-haired girl announces that this is the first time she's seen a human being in years. The girl says that she will finally kill a man and rejoices. Kazuki, a high school student, is sitting at his desk, reading a book and eating. He places a book titled, The Strongest in the Other World with a Magic Sword, on the table and announces that he will read another one. Then he climbs the stairs, opens the door, and appears on the arena stage in front of a crowd of spectators. Kazuki is surprised. The king and his women announce that this is the chosen hero, and that he invested a considerable sum to summon him. The king then asks for a demonstration of his strength. The announcer announces that our country's great hero will fight against the commander of the royal guard. Kazuki thinks it's a dream, doesn't understand how he got here, and assumes his opponent is some kind of boss in a game. Kazuki is awake. The man explains that the boy needs to summon his spiritual armor, since he's a hero. The crowd shouts, calling for the armor to be shown and encouraging the fight. Kazuki is surprised and asks what spiritual armor is. The man with the sword calls Kazuki a bastard and asks if he's underestimating him, then says, "In that case," and raises a huge sword. Kazuki is surprised. He says, "Spiritual blade appear. Die." The man says, "Goodbye, hero." Kazuki asks if he'll die. Kazuki notices the ring fly out of his hand and fall to the floor. In the blink of an eye, Kazuki finds himself on the floor. He asks why everyone is looking at him like that and why this is happening. The armored man says it's a shame, that he was just unlucky. He asks incredulously if this is all true. The king says he never thought a hero would be such trash, and that it was foolish to rely on people from another world. The warrior on the left expresses bewilderment, calling the whole thing a farce. Kazuki, lying on the ground and crying, says he doesn't understand what he did. The king explains that that's all. This country is only for the chosen few, and they don't need any trash. He tells him to throw this trash, meaning Kazuki, into the mirror. And this thing somewhere in the mountains, explaining that this mirror is a real hell and wanting the hero to thoroughly enjoy the views. Kazuki says he doesn't believe it and calls what's happening nonsense. The winner looks at Kazuki. Kazuki says that he says he will never forgive them. A wild girl stands above him. The girl says Kazuki is just unlucky and asks him not to hold a grudge. Suddenly, she hears Kazuki say he'll take revenge on those people. She realizes he's been abandoned by people and asks about it. The girl stares intently. Kazuki coughs. The girl asks if Kazuki wants to live. Kazuki thinks she's an angel or maybe something else. The girl says that if he doesn't answer, he will die, and now he wonders if it's a demon. Kazuki that essentially he doesn't care and that he will definitely survive and take revenge on those bastards. Kazuki's look with hatred and tears. The girl tells him that he will survive now, asks him not to move and explains that he needs to get treatment. The wild woman says she can't get her right arm back and asks for forgiveness. Kazuki doesn't believe it. He thanks the girl. She asks him not to worry and explains that she's well over 1,000 years old and could take care of someone weak. Kazuki asks who she is. Lutricia Ashwaya announces that she is the single most powerful being in the world and the rightful heir to the dragon throne, greets her, and tells her name. Kazuki calls her name too long, and they begin arguing. Lutricia asks for more respect, and Kazuki asks what the only thing means. She replies that this means that her friends, his friends, and all the dragons have been exterminated by humans. Kazuki now understands that Ruta is just like him, and that she is completely alone in this world. Ruta says she believes there are still survivors somewhere and vows to find them. The girl says they've been chatting too long and she'll get some water. Kazuki apologizes. The girl turns around abruptly. Kazuki screams the girl's name as she falls on top of him, screaming. Kazuki and Ruta see a large bear, and the girl says she heard some monsters can sense spiritual power. Ruta says she can't die until she finds her family. Kazuki agrees and steels himself. Kazuki says it's spiritual power. He raises his hand, from which the energy emanates, and notices it growing. The bear roars and leaps, startling Kazuki and Ruta. Later, somewhere in the den, over the monster's bones, Ruta says he's never seen such spiritual power before and asks if he's really human. The girl says she, too, was abandoned by people. Kazuki says it might be his blessing, to which Ruta offers to control the power a little. The man remains silent and then agrees. Ruta says that his strength is so incredible that it is hard to believe and that with practice it will be a very useful skill. Kazuki agrees and says that then they will have the opportunity for revenge. Ruta says that Kazuki's companion will be the heir to the dragons herself. She asks if he is happy and hopes for him. They smile and then there is a fist bump. Kazuki stands at the entrance to the cave and shouts, "Well, hello world." He then looks at Ruta, who yawns and asks why he's up so early. The girl asks what's wrong and if he's fallen in love with her, since she's beautiful and everyone's interested. Kazuki replies that he's not interested in children and is kicked by Ruta. Kazuki explains that shouting out one's feelings is also part of the training. Ruta explains that spiritual power is the life energy inherent in all living beings, and by shouting out one's feelings, one can use spiritual techniques. She explains that, more precisely, one must demonstrate the feelings of one's heart. Kazuki says he doesn't understand. Ruta decides she'll have to resort to drastic training. Kazuki enters the river, notices a strong current, and says he can't get out. He doesn't understand her words. The girl explains that summoning spiritual power is very easy and that spiritual power is highly variable. It might even have the ability to regenerate. He says he doesn't understand, and Ruta tells him to imagine his arm growing back. Kazuki hears a rustling sound and notices a huge wolf lunging at him. Kazuki says he's gotten too comfortable and that he'll be killed, asking if he'll die. Kazuki then says he doesn't want to die. Kazuki remembers his loss in the arena and realizes that he doesn't want to die. He screams, "I don't want to die." He reports that he's experiencing that feeling again. He screams, summoning the spiritual flame and grabbing the wolf with one hand. He looks up with fear and tension. Kazuki enters the cave with the defeated body of the monster, which surprises and delights Ruta. She says he seems to have done well. Kazuki releases the wolf from his hands and the large creature falls to the ground. Kazuki says it might be the Mountain Lord. Ruta explains that she thinks the time has come. He asks what she's talking about, to which Ruta explains that they won't achieve anything if they stay here forever. The guy explains what that means, so he's finished his training. The girl confirms and says it's time to leave the mountains. Kazuki sighs and says there are only mountains around. He says he never thought he'd be able to return from hell. The girl asks who he wants to kill. He replies that it is a warrior with a huge sword, who was supposedly called the defender of the country. Ruta explains that a warrior's spiritual power depends on the size of their weapon, and says that with Kazuki's ring, he won't be able to defeat the warrior. Kazuki replies that this is because he's too weak. She replies that Kazuki is no weakling and that spiritual power can be developed through extensive training, and that one doesn't become invincible so easily. She points out that he survived her hellish training and therefore shouldn't be discouraged. Kazuki agrees and says that with his strength, they can defeat anyone. Ruta says that's a good idea and she'll help. She says she'll train him and he agrees. Kazuki remarks that they need to find a place to spend the night. The girl spots a house and notices that someone is there. Kazuki says it's an old man and that he's curious. He asks Ruta if she knows the man, and she replies no, but she has one thought. The old man says he was waiting for Lutricia Ashwaya, the heir of dragons, and Lord Kazuki Tovu. They see a table full of food. The girl says it's been 600 years since she got so full, and the man says he's glad they're satisfied. Kazuki wonders why he's here and how he knows them. He wonders if he can be trusted. The man at the table asks if Kazuki enjoyed the food. He agrees and Ruta says she wants to explain. She explains that these people listen to the voices of the stars and believe that spiritual power is a voice coming from the stars. They are travelers who tell people about the current state of the world. Kazuki remarks that they are like nomads, only they don't herd livestock. The old man explains that he listens to the voices of the stars and predicts impending disasters. He has come to protect people. The man says he is talking about the various manifestations of natural matter in the world. Kazuki explains that if you can read spiritual power, you can understand a person's thoughts, and this also applies to people. The girl says it's cheating and cool. The man explains that his goal is to guide them to their destination, explaining that this was the will of the stars. The girl says that then we need to tell them where they should go. The old man says they must go to the kingdom of the beastmen. Fanonfin. They say they can get there through human land. The man gives them a pass and a map. Kazuki thanks them and says he's made extensive preparations. The old man informs them that the journey will be long and has prepared a change of clothes for them. Kazuki says he looks like a knight now, and the girl says it fits well. Ruta asks if he's aroused by looking at her, to which the boy replies that he's not interested. The old man reminds Ruta to put on her hood and helps her put it on. Ruta explains that since silver hair is a characteristic of ancient races, it's best to hide it, and explains that despite the truce, humans treat beast men like slaves. Ruta remarks that humans are unpleasant creatures, but she can defend herself. Kazuki asks Ruta if she can use more spiritual energy, to which Ruta replies that she used to be able to, but not anymore. The man says they need to rest well today and set out at dawn tomorrow. Kazuki thanks the man and apologizes for disturbing them. The man says that this is his job as a star reader. An older man tells them to be careful. Kazuki thanks him. Kazuki and Ruta leave. He says what a good man he is. The girl says they are neither good nor bad. He and Ruta go together. Ruta continues that they are always obligated to carry out the star's orders. The old man says he thinks his task is now complete, wishing for the stars to guide Kazuki and Ruta, and disappears along with the house. Ruta reports that they're there. The girl explains that they first need to pass through the checkpoint of the human city of Sopronic. Ruta asks why there are so many people and what happened, and it looks like they'll have to wait in line. Kazuki recalls that spiritual power and wonders if he says let's go, and the girl agrees. The man says he's bored and, sitting with the two women, considers fighting with someone or going out for a drink. Kazuki looks ahead with a determined expression. He reports that the enemy is definitely here. Kazuki feels his heartbeat quicken. The girl reassures Kazuki. The girl says there may be other wielders of spiritual power here, so they need to calm down. He apologizes. The girl explains that they need to get through security first. The soldier confirms this and says that the triumphal parade in honor of Lord Saikido will begin soon. The soldier says that the gentleman is the protector of the kingdom and protects everyone from danger, and asks that they be sure to come. The man says welcome to Sopronica, and the text explains that this is the land of humans, the city of Hansrostock. Kazuki says that there are so many people here. A stranger shouts at Kazuki not to be blind, and Ruta asks if there will be a duel. The crowd around him perks up, and one man announces he's betting 50 coins on the guy. Kazuki thinks he needs to figure out how to get to Saikudo and that it's best not to attract attention right now. A man shouts that a duel in Sopronic is a sacred right. Kazuki says he's in a hurry. The man with the sword says he's lucky he's being kind today. Kazuki asks what that was. The woman speaks. Kazuki looks at her questioningly. Ruta says she should challenge him during the parade and that it's interesting. She explains that if she simply challenges him to a duel, he'll refuse, but it's difficult in front of such a crowd. She continues that he simply won't have a choice, since he's the guardian of this country. Kazuki says he understands. Kazuki notices that he's nervous and reflects on how they've come this far. Yet he's afraid. The sound of a knock on the door is accompanied by a scream. The woman says everything is wrong and turns to the gentleman, trying to say something, but is interrupted. The man tells her to scream from the heart, but it's immediately clear she's faking it. The man urges her to scream and show her terror, pointing a sword at her. A woman is in tears. A man says he misses the war and would like to fight again, shouting Saikido. Silhouettes of people tell of cries of despair before death and rivers of blood everywhere. Kazuki recognizes the man and challenges him to a duel. The man smiles. A crowd of men cheers and shouts. A man announces that there will be a duel. The The crowd announces that their noble defender has been challenged to a duel and suggests they have some fun. The man says he doesn't believe Kazuki is still alive and calls him a trash hero. Kazuki says he can't believe they met so soon. The man explains that Kazuki is an idiot for coming back to lose again. Kazuki asks if the man noticed his spiritual power. The man laughs and says there's no point in making him laugh. He says he's being kind today and advises Kazuki to leave before it's too late. Kazuki asks if the enemy is afraid. He replies that he doesn't want to get his hands dirty again and asks what he'll do with such a weak force. The man announces that a duel will begin. Kazuki reports that everything is the same as it was then, but much has changed since then. He went through hell to defeat the enemy. The armored man stands motionless. Kazuki prepares for battle. Ruta, hooded, watches the scene. Powerful explosion occurs. The man asks what's going on and says that's all the enemy can do. Kazuki tells him to watch, then strikes with his sword. The man reacts with surprise. Kazuki raises his sword for another strike, and the man prepares to attack. Kazuki suddenly lunges forward and strikes the man in the chest. The boy raises his hand in surprise. The man punches him in the face, causing screams from those around him. The man says he learned nothing from the last time and calls him an idiot. The man, surprised, asks what it is and why Kazuki isn't falling. Kazuki says, "Take that." The boy delivers a series of blows to the man with the sword, screaming. The boy announces the names of his moves, Deer Horn and Bear Paw. The man with the sword is surprised and asks what happened to the boy's spiritual power, then explains that things are completely different from what they were back then. A man from the crowd says that this guy is so strong. Kazuki says he can win. The man says he doesn't believe it and is outraged that Kazuki dared to say such a thing, then delivers a powerful punch that causes a huge explosion. Kazuki gasps, clutching his wounded stomach. The man tells them to get ready. The crowd looks at him in surprise. The enemy says he will kill the guy with his soul blade. The man with the sword awakens his spiritual weapon. Ruta announces that he has awakened his spiritual weapon and shouts at Kazuki to run. Kazuki is on his knees, clutching his hand, which is bleeding. Kazuki talks about spiritual weapons, which are special weapons awakened by spiritual power users through very strong feelings. The girl informs them that if the enemy can awaken the weapon, they have no chance of victory, and explains that one mistake will lead to death, so the only option is to flee immediately. The next scene shows an armed dark knight appearing. The man and Kazuki. Kazuki sees a group of people surrounding a hooded girl. The hooded girl asks Kazuki to run away. He says that, all things considered, it's best to run away now. He stands up and makes a sound of pain. Ruta looks at him in surprise. Kazuki says that he can't do that because if he runs away now, he'll be running for the rest of his life. Kazuki prepares to fight an opponent who stands there with a large scythe. Kazuki looks forward with determination. The man says okay, then slams his foot down on the floor, breaking it. The man says he will cut him into pieces and adds that no hard feelings. The enemy says it's an air slash, then stabs Kazuki in the shoulder. Kazuki says he dodged it, so how could he reach him? The man asks with a grin if Kazuki thinks he has time to rest and orders him to continue the fight. Kazuki reacts to the man's attack. Kazuki says that if he gets close to the enemy and runs towards him, the enemy calls him a fool and strikes him. Kazuki responds with despair and asks what he should do. The man says it's useless and he's still a trash hero. Kazuki explains that the enemy's spiritual power is concentrated in the sickle, meaning any attacks that reach him are spiritual attacks. Kazuki releases his weapon. The man asks what's wrong and if he's surrendered. He breathes heavily and says that if so, they need to focus on his spiritual power. The man says it's time to finish and explains that he'll cut off his arms and legs and hang his body from the city gates. Kazuki says he can't afford to lose. Ruta remains silent. He explains that it's even possible to know another person's thoughts if you have the ability to read spiritual energy. He explains that you need to expand your consciousness and sense spiritual energy, and then feel it with your whole body. The man yells bite and applies an air slash. The crowd of people looks on in surprise. The man in armor says, "Huh." Kazuki jumps into attack and looks at the man. The man says the enemy was able to dodge his aerial slash and expresses surprise. The man exclaims that he doesn't understand what's happening. Kazuki lands a powerful punch to the man's face. The man screams. Kazuki prepares for his next move, and the man is thrown back. He strikes the enemy. The girl and the man report that he awakened the ability to read spiritual power right during the fight. Kazuki says he's the strongest and invincible and asks why this is happening. Kazuki says that can't be true and breathes heavily. Kazuki makes a sound of pain. Kazuki calls someone a bastard and asks them not to look. Kazuki names someone. A boy asks to be saved. A man begs for help. Kazuki begs to be saved. Kazuki makes a sound as he prepares to attack. The man with the sword makes a sound of fear. Kazuki delivers a powerful blow to the man with the sword. The knight breaks his shield and falls to his knees. He clenches his fist and says that if the knight appears before his eyes again, he will die. The man says the winner is the young challenger, and Kazuki makes a sound of surprise. A man says it's impossible. A woman says it's terrible. A man explains he can't believe it. Another man says it's not true. A woman says it's shocking. A man explains it's unbelievable. A woman says it's scary. The woman says she lost, and Kazuki says it's a great job. Kazuki explains that he's cool. He says, phew. He notices her approaching and shouts, Yuwa, when the girl suddenly throws herself into his arms. The woman says Kazuki is simply crazy and a complete psychopath, and offers to take care of him. Kazuki replies that it hurts and asks to be gentle. The man tells Lute that during the fight, he heard her calling his name. He says that's true, and the girl asks what of it. The guy says that, by the way, he bet all his money on them winning. The girl says she's made a fortune and laughs, and the man remarks on how reckless that is. The man asks what it is, and the guy shows her a bag of money. The girl suggests throwing a real feast to celebrate their victory, but Kazuki asks for some rest first. The girl calls Kazuki boring. Kazuki agrees and suggests finding a hotel, which the girl agrees with. Kazuki explains that he won and avenged his hand. He reports that it is fluffy. The hooded girl says they need to gather information at the tavern. The man asks if it's a tavern, to which the hooded girl replies they can stop there and ask about the local 40-year-olds. Kazuki asks how that happened. The man says everyone is happy. He asks who he is. The man apologizes. He explains that he didn't expect such a nice atmosphere. He says it's just like an RPG and asks what they want to know. He is surprised and asks what's wrong. The girl. The manager of the Rostock house and tavern owner reports that, although the guests are dressed very simply, it's clear they're not short of cash, and he offers to stay the night with him, as he also owns a nearby mansion. He says he'd be happy to host such guests. Kazuki asks what. The man says they accept the invitation. The girl explains that if he belongs to the family of the city's rulers, he must have records of mythical beasts, and she thinks they should take advantage of this opportunity to learn more. He says he understands and adds that he needs to heal his body as soon as possible. Kazuki asks to be shown where he can rest, and the man invites him to follow him. Kazuki says that's not necessary. The man leads Kazuki and the girl inside the building. The girl says goodbye. He says it's very spacious here. The man stands silently next to him. The girl tells Kazuki to look at her. The girl explains that the bed is so soft, just like a cloud, and laughs. The man reports that the guests seem to be happy with the room. He says he'll take care of it first. He sighs and falls onto the bed. Kazuki explains that even with proper concentration, healing takes time, and explains that his unique healing method transforms spiritual power into a needle and thread, stitching wounds and healing them. Kazuki calls Ruta and says that this is where she is. The boy explains that there's nothing in this world that can't be accomplished if you put in the effort. The man explains that if you don't do anything, nothing will be achieved. He says he doesn't want anyone to suffer because of him. Kazuki asks if humans and beastmen aren't peaceful, noting that they're slaves. The girl confirms this and explains that she thinks the girls from the bar were also chained to prevent them from escaping. The man explains that nothing has really changed, and that this is still Earth. The man says this is punishment for the girl's disobedience and tells her that now she will know what not to do. The man hits the girl on the head, and the girl covers her head with her hands. Kazuki says he's worried about the reason for what's happening, and at the same time he says, "Ha!" Then Kazuki says, "The devil," and continues running down the street, and at the same time, he also says, "Ha!" He reports that the room he is currently in and the fun time he had in the tavern contrast with the cruelty towards another race that he simply cannot turn a blind eye to. Kazuki says KH, then asks where she is and starts running. He approaches the bars where the people are. He says he can't believe they're in this situation and says they need to find a way out as soon as possible. The man explains that everything depends on whether they can stay calm and work together. He says that if they panic, they definitely won't get out of here. The husband. A man approaches Kazuki, asking if he would like to purchase a slave. Kazuki demands to know the whereabouts of the girl the man beat earlier. The man tries to get Kazuki's attention by saying, "Hey!" The man says she still refuses to obey him and it's better for him to just throw her away and save himself the trouble. The man explains that he was simply training his slave. The man asks what he's talking about. He looks at the man silently. A woman lies handcuffed on the floor, and a man with black hair, wearing a cloak with a cross, tells her she's just like him. The man is trying to reach something while lying on the floor. Several creatures with animal heads stand nearby. Kazuki tells her he was plucked from his home world, mistreated, and then abandoned. Kazuki asks if the girl wants to live. The girl looks at his outstretched hand. He says that if he can't help, no one else can, and asks for a chance. He explains that he doesn't want anyone to suffer because of him and asks them not to give up on him. The man says that he must be prepared for the consequences and accept responsibility for his actions. The girl tells. Kazuki says, "Shoo." Then the girl breathes heavily and says, "Ha!" After which she suddenly pulls her hand forward and says, "Ha!" Kazuki grabs the girl's hand. A man yells at them not to touch his client with dirty hands. Another man throws money and yells, "Bo." He says he's buying the girl and asks if that's enough. The man is surprised by the amount of money and asks where Kazuki got it from. Kazuki tells him to pick out clothes and shoes for the girl, and the man agrees. Kazuki extends his hand to the girl behind bars, and she takes it. He says the cloak suits the girl very well. The girl remains silent and lowers her hood. She growls at him. He apologizes and suggests they go get something to eat. He explains that he gave in to his emotions. Ruta says that he came running without even thinking and that the woman asks why Kazuki bought it. Kazuki says, The girl says she simply couldn't ignore him. He explains that he couldn't ignore her because she was so much like him, abandoned and despised by everyone. The girl says that's why she couldn't leave him to die. He clenches his fist and says, Kazuki says he doesn't want to be considered her master and suggests she live her life as she pleases. The girl explains that everything important to her disappeared during the war, and she had no choice but to become a slave to survive. Kazuki confirms that the girl can do whatever she wants. He says he doesn't know what to do. Kazuki tells him he's still stupid and knows little about this world, and asks if he did the right thing. The girl explains that she wants to thank him for freeing her. He says that Lufia. Kazuki says okay and agrees to meet the girl's friend, who offers to introduce him to her friend. Kazuki explains that he's traveling with his savior. The girl warns that Ruta is probably furious and yells that Kazuki won't go anywhere without her. He explains that he'll take some sweets with him because she'll probably like them. He then examines the sweets in the package. He and the girl go inside, and he tells Ruta that they'll be back. Kazuki explains what happened. The man calls Ruta. The woman says she's familiar with this kind of situation and explains that this is what happens when people are enslaved in rooms. The man says there are signs of a struggle on the curtain. Kazuki says, "Damn it." Then Kazuki and the girl react with surprise. The man says they've already returned and asks for the money, which should be enough for the creature. He says you and asks what the man did to Lutoya. The man apologizes for the inconvenience. The man says they will sell it for a very good price. Kazuki says that's nonsense and grabs the man by the throat. The man tries to break free. Kazuki looks on in surprise. He says he wants to understand why he is being scolded. The man says she was sold to the Rostock family, and that it's the greatest joy to be in the service of the ruler's family. Kazuki says the man has another slave, and if he doesn't want to die, he must tell her where she is. The man barely answers. GH. Kazuki strikes him. The man is confident. He explains that she is in the mansion of the Duke of Himrui. The woman reports seeing the Duke's soldiers taking the girl away and asks for them to hurry, explaining that she heard about the Duke's cruel treatment of his slaves and begs them to save the girl. The man shouts at someone and slams his fist on the floor. Cad. The girl says, "Of course," and Kazuki thanks her for her help. Then they show the Rostock family estate. He tells her it's best for her to hide for now and doesn't think it's a good idea to take Lufia with her. Lufia explains that if they let her, she could clear the way for them, and then says that from now on she will follow any of their orders and will fight too. Kazuki asks Lufia if she has spiritual power, to which she replies that of course, and that she would do anything to help her master. Lufia urges him to go, and Kazuki remarks that she is much stronger than him. He tells them to stand. He says that Lufia can't be stopped at all. He tells Lufia. The woman tells Mr. Kazuki. He speaks back. The woman notices something. He notices the stairs and speaks of the spiritual power of the moon. The man says that the red blood flowing down the snow-white skin is amazing. The woman says it is beautiful and wonderful. The man in the shadows explains that he can't stand it anymore. He calls out to himself. Kazuki shouts, asking if Ruta is here. The man stands in the tool room, looking at the girl chained to the wall. The guy exclaims, saying it's terrible, and the girl asks who they are. The character above, with his mouth closed, calls him Enki. Kazuki asks if the man did it. The man says it felt so good and asks not to disturb him. The woman screams that no one should be allowed in, and he says that he ordered that no one should be allowed in while he is having fun. Kazuki yells at Ruta to hold on, and Ruta and another man help her up. Ruta calls Kazuki by name. Kazuki apologizes and admits that it's all his fault, confirming that it was him. The woman says she feels better after seeing them. He explains that the main thing is that she found him, and the girl says that it's okay. He says Naya, then says that they're leaving, turning to Lufia. Kazuki says he doesn't even want to waste time on them, then falls silent. The girl confirms they're finished and leaves. The man with long hair makes a sound of fear. Kazuki says it looks like they're surrounded, and the girl replies that she sees it. The man says they invaded the estate of the eldest son of House Rostock and calls it a true rebellion against the ruler. The man asks if they destroyed the mansion. The man shouts that the rebels will atone for their sins only with their blood. The man says he is the ruler and asks who they are. Kazuki says it is the ruler. He says his family treats half-humans cruelly. The man says the rebels should be glad that the nobles are teaching them the right way to live, and they should express their gratitude by asking if they agree with it. The man explains that it's not cruel. A man says that these are wonderful words, another man says that of course, and a third man explains exactly what. Kazuki says he's now absolutely certain. The girl explains that there will never be a place for demi-humans in this world. Kazuki explains that this rotten race must be wiped off the face of the earth, and that this won't change until he eradicates the problem from its roots. He tells Lufia to take Lutu and return to the dungeon, and to stay away from the entrance. Lufia understands and agrees. Kazuki says they have nowhere to run and orders them to stop talking. The man is surprised by the light, and Kazuki explains that he thought they could resolve the problem peacefully someday. He reports that this will not happen. https://remangier.org/manga/the-tale-of-the-useless-heroes-revenge-a-boy-abandoned-in-another-world-swears-rebellion/main